hi everyone, my name is Manasi. So that extra A throws people off. So I generally tend to say my name is like Nancy with an M, so it makes it easy for you to remember. So today what I want to do is talk about some things that I think I have sort of developed over time as a tech lead. So going back in history, in 49 BC, Julius Caesar decided to conquer Rome and decided to walk in, crossing the river Rubicon, taking his army over. By doing so, one of the things that he did was break an ancient law, the ancient law that forbade army from entering Rome. Now, this history event has come across to be symbolized as doing something that you cannot be undone, so reaching a point of no return. So my talk today is going to address some of the key things in your journey as a tech lead that you probably want to address and talk about and fix as soon as possible. So let's start. In this conversation, I guess, I'm going to speak a lot about tech lead, and I'm very aware that in the industry, the definition is probably different for different titles. There isn't really any consistency. So when I speak about a tech lead, here are the responsibilities that I have in mind for this individual. So someone who's a software engineer, so someone who's still close to code, maybe not 100% coding, but close enough, is responsible internally within the team. So is responsible to mentor and coach the team, is accountable, most importantly, and is driving the sort of technical direction of that team. Also working very closely with the business and working closely with potentially the people who are looking at the broader part of the business. When I start on a project, these are some of the things I take with me and go, here are some things that I know I have had to repeatedly look at. So this is sort of a small toolkit that I've created for myself. It's a mix of tech stuff and non-tech stuff, but I think that's the important message, because especially if you've got the tech lead's hat on, you are potentially looking at things that are not just technical, because you need to bring in culture, you need to change mindset. So we will touch upon some of those things. So when I start on a project, whether it's a greenfield project or whether it's a new project, existing project, one of the things that I ask myself or find out is what the path to production is. Funnily enough, part of our job is to develop stuff, but the last thing that comes up in the life cycle of what we do is going into production. And unfortunately, a lot of teams and a lot of tech leads tend to address this last. I would say flip it on its head and think about it from the start. Let's look at, so State of DevOps reports. If you've heard of it, amazing. If you haven't, I would say look it up. It's a fantastic report. They've identified 4 key metrics, and let's talk about 2 of them today. So how frequently you release to production, so how frequently you deploy to production, and how long does that commit on commit from somewhere end up in production. So that's your lead time. They've also identified 4 different sort of performance buckets that most organizations sort of live in. And this has certainly been our experience, I think, where we see a lot of organizations who are further down to the right, wanting to move further left. And it's very rare that we get called upon by clients who are already in the sort of elite bucket, but we do see a lot of organizations where they are not releasing as often as they would like to. I've started a poll on the Slack channel associated with this talk. I would love to know in the audience where you're at in terms of how often you release. So sort of register this and take this into account when you do that poll. The thing that I find really interesting about this slide, actually there are 2 things that I find really interesting about this slide, is when you look at the majority of the industry, right? Because the report looks back many years of data and sort of research. And if you look at the slide, it shows you that majority of the organization is still in the non-elite group, which is very interesting because we've got the tools, we've got the platforms to consistently be in that elite performer bracket, but we're not. And it's also super interesting to note that in 1 year, there's been a sudden shift in that sort of elite performance bracket. This to me really shows that the industry is wanting to move towards that elite bracket, but we're not quite there. Also, retail is one industry where you will find majority of the 20% sort of fit in there, because their cutting edge, competitive edge is being able to get to customers as soon as possible. When we talk to customers about, when we talk to clients about getting into the state where you can deploy to production on demand, I think they want to get there and they understand why it's important. But this really highlights to me the impact it has on your software delivery performance and organizational performance when you look at what it would do if you were able to be in a position to sort of get there faster. Out of all the things as a tech lead that you have to uncover and battle and fight, this is probably one of the most important things I recommend you do when you start your journey. Or if you're already doing it for a while, I would still say pause and look back and think, what is it that I can do to successfully get to a stage where I can deploy every commit to production? And the key is successfully, right? Because going to production is easy. You need other practices in place. The thing is, each day you wait to do this, you're building new patterns, you're building new features, you're introducing more new tools and platforms. The longer you take to get to a state where you can deploy to production on every commit, the more complex it's going to get for you to get there. And don't cross the Rubicon, step back and don't reach the point of no return. We've seen clients where, I've seen teams where they are so far ahead so far away from being able to deploy every commit to production because of their existing architecture, that it's easier for them to go through the pain once a month, because for them to get to the stage, it means they have to sort of redig the whole thing. So you don't want to get to that stage. Stop in your tracks and try and think about what is it that I can do right now to start moving to that, because it requires a lot of conversations. You need to bring people on board. You need to get the right practices in place. While we're talking about practices, none of this comes for free. Let's go into production with every commit. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? But you need some things to back it up. When I first started, a good 8-9 years ago, one of my first projects, this was the release process of that particular client. So we wrote a story, we committed it, and we zipped up, created an artifact, put it on Dropbox, and we told somebody somewhere, don't know who, through some chat, saying, hey, we've updated this, deploy it. And they would pull that artifact down, unzip it, and then deploy it. Now, you can imagine, and that was for one environment, right? Not even to go to production. So I think we've moved far away from that. I think we have reached a stage where most organizations today have continuous integration server in place. But I think a lot of what we miss, or what we don't really pay attention to, is the continuous delivery part of it. Because when just having a CI tool is fairly easy today, especially with like there are SaaS versions of CI who take away the headache of maintaining and supporting CI. So it's quite there, but then we are not really using its best benefit by doing continuous delivery with it. I would say when I turn up on a project, I pretty much use this as a standard, where if the infrastructure and if the path to production is not set up, we don't play a functional story, because that really forces you to get some of the things on the left there in place. So things like deployment automation, right? I rather have no feature on any environments than have lots of features stacked up in lower environments where the users can't really get hold of. I suppose the most important goal that we've got is get what we do in users' hands. And if it's not going to reach them, it's really, I suppose, invaluable. I would say get things like deployment automation in place. Think about code maintainability and think about how you're going to structure some of these things, because you want to be able to independently release them. Trunk, I think Us developers love a good discussion, and I think trunk-based development, in my experience, has certainly been one of them. I'm a big advocate of it. And if there's one thing I would say about it is, in my entire career at ThoughtWorks and with all the clients that we've worked with, a lot of them were not in this trunk-based development structure. But when we sort of took them through that journey, I've made it a point to always ask them if they see any benefit and if they'd ever go back to doing non-trunk-based development. And consistently, we constantly get feedback saying, no, it's great. We'd never look back. So I know it's one of those things where you're hesitant to try. I would say don't knock it off until you try it. I just wanted to sort of pull out some anti-patterns that I've seen with continuous integration and continuous delivery. One such sort of anti-pattern that I've seen is where there is a tendency to go, oh, the test fails so often that I'll just turn the test stage off. I think it really kind of defies the whole point of having those gates in your pipeline. And the other one that I constantly get asked in the last few years is, well, if you've tied up the stages in your pipeline to be sort of gates where if you can't get to production because something is failing, why have you set it up that way? Well, we can't get to production if something's failing, so it's a problem. But I think it's important to understand that these gates are there to help your future self from not worrying about why something broke in production. It's that feedback that you get beforehand. The other one we get often is, or we see often, is where we have a different pipeline when there's a hotfix, as opposed to the same service going through a different pipeline when you're doing other releases, which is, again, it's not great because you are bypassing some good gates that you've got in place. Because if something is failing, it's because it's telling you it's not going to work in production. Also, avoid manual steps. I don't mean manual triggers. I totally get that there are sometimes you want to do manual triggers and manual deployments, manual triggers to go into deployments, but I'm talking about stages where if you want to upload something to S3, don't manually do it and then trigger the pipeline. They all automate everything that you can automate. One thing that I've seen with a lot of organization is a lot of organizations have the money and time to spend on tech, but their processes have not changed. And on the flip side, a lot of organizations don't have a lot of process in place, but they're not really investing in the right tools either. It's really important to get that balance right, the balance right between what your organization's process is and what tools you've got. Use each other as an advantage, bounce off of each other, don't fight each other. Change management, I think, is one such good example. Change management will bog you down. In fact, it's been predicted that change management leads to low performance in an organization. So sure, in some cases, audit trail might be important. Maybe as a tech lead, ask yourself and ask people around you, why can we potentially move this into the pipeline? So if you want reports, you may not need the reports, but if you really need it, can we do that as part of the pipeline? I suppose the problem is some of these processes were created many years ago when the technology wasn't there to support. But now the technology exists, but the processes haven't changed. So always question that status quo. Do not be afraid to question and automate whatever you can. Again, the longer you take to move away to get some of these things in place, they're only going to get harder or close to not possible to get to that state. And I want to reiterate, our biggest goal is to get what we do into users' hands and successfully get them into users' hands. A recent project, actually, when I landed on that project, it was an existing project. And again, as I've said, I was interested in the path to production. So they took me through it. And this was their path to production, right? So it was, there's a commit. it gets deployed into an environment called non-prod, which was actually exactly the same as prod, or if not similar. And if everything was okay there, it got pushed into prod. That's it. Sounds super simple, right? And this is not hypothetical. This is a true story. And this is also a medium-sized organization. And it's not that we were in a simple architecture. We were integrating with multiple different teams. We were integrating with multiple different components. We had stateful components. We were in a distributed event architecture. So all of this is possible even if you are in a bigger organization and have more moving parts. I think there's a misconception that, oh yeah, it's easy to do when you're in a startup. I think that's unfortunately a misconception. I think some of the key things that we took away, rather I took away from working in an environment where everything went into production was there was a mind shift change with quality. So because we knew every commit ended up in production and with a lead time of a few minutes, like 20, 25 minutes top, because we knew that we got the immediate feedback of something was wrong, we cared so much more about what we were building. We cared a great deal about the kind of code that we wrote. We had multiple levels of testing, multiple levels, different types of tests across our services. And because that was our safety net, we never wrote a single line of code that did not have a test associated to it, because that was our safety net. And because we had tests, our quality of code was actually fantastic. Extending anything was super easy. And I think contrary to the belief of the more often we push, there are going to be more problems. So let's just push it the one time and then we worry about it at that one point in time. The problem is that because we push so often, we were able to identify what broke it, and it was also consequently easy to sort of switch it back. We moved on from this perception of, all right, you dev something, dev done, that's where my life cycle ends, because then it's QA's problem, who will then, and in a few days' time when it ends up in production, I've forgotten about what it is. So I think that mindset change is really important. Quality is a team's problem and not an individual's problem. In fact, and it's not just the quality of code, it's also the quality of product. Don't build something because it's shiny and cool. Build something that is important to your users or valuable to your users. So on the same project, one of the things that we constantly did was in our iteration, we had a certain stories that were part of that iteration, but we also had scope for experimentation. So we did quite a lot of A/B testing to identify what would be really useful for our users, and then fed that back into the next iteration. So we were not just building good quality software, we were building valuable products. As a tech lead, bring in the culture of caring. I think give that control to your devs on your team, because I think the caring about quality will inherently come when you give them that control, when you give them that responsibility of seeing what impact that change has in production. In some cases, excuse me, sorry. In some cases, it's actually easier to introduce tech. It's significantly harder to change culture or to change mindset. So my ask of you would be, think about how you can start changing the mindset of your team, get QAs and devs to work together, build automation capabilities within your testers. I think it's very important that the team cares about quality as a whole. Actually, Eric, who's on this call at the minute, has made a very interesting analogy of a town planner, right? So say a tech lead is, we want to build this town, and a tech lead is responsible for 2 or 3 buildings in that picture there. And then there's another team who has a tech lead who's responsible for a few other buildings on the other side of the town. That's great, but someone needs to have the view and the responsibility of the entire town, because you do want to have roads in between buildings. You do want to have gardens and parks and ability. I think of, in the given situation, we all the more care about gardens and parks, right? So someone needs to have this overall view. But I think the important message is someone who's got this overall view. A lot of times in many organizations tend to be a head of tech or a principal architect of some sort. The important thing is someone looking at this overall picture shouldn't be dictating what kind of what the color of the room should be, or where the toilet should be placed. It's understanding the remit of these responsibilities. As a tech lead, you are responsible for the technical vision and technical strategy of those systems that you are responsible for. In fact, one of the clients we worked with, I was tech lead on that project, and we were quite at the start. So we were talking and discussing about what the architecture would look like, what the vision would look like. And one of the cloud architects pulled me to the side and said, whoa, hold on, you are just a developer. Why are you thinking about architecture? And we've certainly seen this a lot. It's important to understand that, of course, as a tech lead of that team, my intention wasn't to build a building that was going to disrupt the guidelines of that town, or build a building that was horizontally spanned across where you'd have no other buildings. But it's important to keep in mind that as a tech lead of a team, it's your control and your responsibility to take that forward. Of course, someone needs to look at the bigger picture, but it's not something that should be dictated to you. And conversely, it's not something you dictate to your teams either. When I guess in my journey of getting to a tech lead, my ability to think of bigger picture, or thinking about not the smallest detail, only came through because my then tech leads pulled me into conversations, even if it is some whiteboarding session, to go, let's think about this bigger picture. Here's the problem we're trying to solve. Do that, because it really, you've got two advantages to that. One, you're enabling your team to think of bigger picture, and also it takes away from the team trying to fix something because it works at that point in time. You want to fix something that is also looking forward, and not just fix something because it just works at this given point in time. I call them lens, but maybe if you have a better sort of analogy for it, I'm happy to hear. So over the years of, when I first started as a developer, I guess if we were to think about building a house, my only focus, because everything else was so overwhelming, was I just wanted to understand windows, right? I wanted to understand what types of windows there are, how do they fit, how do they sit when you think about a house. Okay, as my experience started to grow, I was like, right, I understand the windows. I understand one window. Now, how do I think about multiple windows? Then I think I build the capability to understand how a house works. And then there are different rooms that understand where the window should be placed. And as your experience grows, your perspectives change. So I call them lenses. So it's like, I feel like my lens through which I look at things have changed with time, with experience. And especially as a tech lead, it's very important, if you're not already doing so, to collect these lenses on the way. And if you're not actively doing it, I would say try to actively do it, where you recognize that different lenses are important to use when you're talking to different audience. So if you are intending to bring in Kafka into your organization, and you want to get your head of tech on board, or you want to get somebody like an organization on board, talk in the language of what advantage that brings you, or brings the organization. What problem is it solving? How would that solve multiple teams' problems, as opposed to smaller level details like, oh, there's a cool little library that we can do this with. It is important that you have smaller level detailed conversation, but again, use a different lens when you're talking to someone a little less experienced on your team. I guess the important message here is use the right lens when you speak to the right audience, and build these lenses along the way, because they will come in handy. I call this the blinker theory. I think certainly has been my experience where this is kind of your day-to-day as a tech lead, where there are so many things propping up constantly. Every day is a brand new day, and I suppose it gets worse as you take on more responsibilities. It's important that you're able to focus on all of these, right? But it's extraordinarily important that you're also able to unfocus on these. So ability to go, actually, I know this exists, but I actually don't want to look at it right now because that's not the most important thing. And similarly, so say you're driving a car, you see all these signs, you know that you're going at 60 miles an hour, and you know there are horses on the street. That is the most important thing that I want to address right now. It's not that I've forgotten that winter is coming. I do have to address it, but just not right now. I think that ability to focus and unfocus is probably a very important skill set that you will learn or should have as you go through this journey. I think this is very true with developers as well, right? Like, I think because we love solving problems, it's so easy to start a problem, find a different branch and go down that branch, and then remind ourselves saying, oh, actually, that was not even the original problem we were trying to solve. So I would say, even if you're in that situation, learn to sort of step back and go, right, that is an important problem that we still need to solve. Let's put that aside for now. Let's come back to the original problem and we'll deal with that separately. One of the last things that I want to touch upon is some of the best projects that I've worked with have been when what I call this trio, the cycle trio, worked really, really well together. So I pretty much say we were each other's shadows. We were like this micro little team constantly. I think we were sick of each other at one point, but it certainly helped our goal and our mission. There's a difference between a lead engineer and a tech lead. So as a tech lead, your responsibility is a little more than just the technical vision. You care about the business and you care about doing the right thing for your business with tech as your tool. So it's important that you recognize that not all solutions are tech solutions. A while ago, we were integrating with one of the legacy systems with the organization, and that legacy system was responsible for authentication. And what the latency of that was pretty low when it came to, pretty high when it came to a small number of requests. So I think the team got together and they were like, okay, the business model for this organization is to earn money. So we can't have users drop off. How can we sort of fix this? And they sat through many conversations to sort of find a solution. And then they happened to have a chat with business, and the business just said, we don't care, we don't need to solve that problem, we just give it to them for free. So I think the important message here is, I know as developers, we love challenges and we love solving problems. We're almost inherently geeky, right? Because that's what we love doing. But it's important to recognize that not all solutions need to be tech solutions. Step out and ask the question of why. Why are we doing this? Is there any value that we're getting, or we're not doing it? Build a culture in your team of asking why. And when you get answers, don't take opinions, ask for data, because it's easy for one person's opinion to drive any sort of feature. It's important to sort of have that conversation, to build that confidence in the team that they have the control to say why. These are probably some of the few things of the many things that you probably end up doing day to day. I guess this is something I have certainly found I need to do day in, day out, and constantly fight for some of these things. So it certainly has helped me, and I've spoken to a lot of other tech leads who've seen this, and they certainly felt like it was very useful. And I do hope this has been useful to you. I'd love to hear anything else that you may have to say or add on the Slack channel. So thank you very much.
And with that said, we have lots of questions for you, Manasi.
Excellent.
And how do you convince people on the value of continuous integration and automation?
It's an interesting question because, as I said, convincing people is harder than just introducing tools, right? My perception has been that a lot of gatekeepers tend to feel like they are potentially going to lose a responsibility. I think it's helping them understand that it's not taking a responsibility or control away from them. It's how do we sort of change responsibilities towards achieving a common goal that is getting to production as soon as possible. I think it's that sort of bring them onto your team, help them understand how some of the responsibilities can be shared. I think that probably has been my sort of go-to anyway.
Cool. So the next one is a question, but actually a comment. And Timur says, why am I saying yes so much? I can answer that because Manasi is right.
That's great. No, I'm glad to hear.
No, it was a great talk. Thank you. There's more questions, though. Amir says, sorry, no, that's another comment. There's a question here. When you talked about distance in architecture, how do you make those people that think they have a say in the engineering decisions understand that they're informed or consulted only?
This certainly takes time. So the way I tackled that situation where I was told I was not allowed to architect the system that I was closest to was certainly being defensive doesn't help. It needs to be a conversation and it takes time. So I took that particular individual through plans, and I think I started to step into further details to help them understand what it is that was driving our decision to move towards that sort of vision. And I think over time, watching us do that, I think it helped build confidence in that particular individual and a group of individuals to go, actually, I see. And then sort of exposing them to culture where, as a team, we looked at multiple different things. So I think it's just sort of that exposure that helps a lot of times.
Okay, cool. Here's a slightly longer one from Melvin. I'm going to read it out in full. I remember asking Manasi the same question a few years ago at a radar event in Manchester. I found it incredibly difficult to drive my employer at the time to increase deployment frequency. They were so scared. One problem they had was segregating the infra team from the dev teams. Another was that there was too much dependency on I have no idea. This word is not readable. So my question then is it easier and much more realistic to get into the elite deployments in a mature microservices architecture?
I think irrespective of whether you're in a microservices architecture or not, I think achieving frequent deployments is certainly possible. And in terms of how you want to do that. So for example, one of my current projects, what I intend, so this is my plan for the next few weeks as I'm sort of shifting into the different project in the same organization, is because we're building a small slice of something new, what I would like to do is sort of, instead of change everything existing, what I intend to do is take that small slice, even within our remit, a smaller size, to go and say, look, can we attempt to try and do this in this fashion? And let's trial it. If it's not going to work, we can identify what is not going to work, and then we can take it from there. But instead of maybe attacking all of this, find that little small thing that has less impact on the business that a certain individual is worried about, and take that to prove you can successfully still achieve your goal. That's what I would do anyway.
Cool. Thank you. Next one. I like the key metrics a lot. One challenge I'm facing, how do you make use of end-to-end tests? They seem to provide value, but they take a long time to run and block your deploys. What's your take on end-to-end testing?
I think end-to-end testing is quite an overloaded term, right? So if you mean integration tests that goes across all systems, even outside your remit, I would say maybe two things. One, look at how many of these you've got, and look at also then what the boundaries are. So if there is a particular system that is constantly unstable, that probably reflects in your prod as well. But if your tests are constantly failing, there's probably a different problem somewhere else. However, end-to-end tests are important, and that sort of confidence to go, a quick confidence to go, actually these things you can touch upon, great. Maybe you can pull some things out into contract testing as well. I suppose we can sort of carry this conversation on depending on what level you're asking, but we can certainly take this into Slack if you like.
Cool. And apologies, my body language had to do with the wasp that came in through the open window, so it was nothing to do with your answer. So the next one. How does tech lead manage long arguments, unresolved arguments between solutions?
I'm glad you've touched upon this. I think a lot of times, it's especially when you first start this tech lead journey, right? It's so easy to get sucked into those conversations. It's so easy to want to have a say because you are passionate about what you do. What has helped me is talking facts or talking in terms of impact or risk. I think it really helps drive a conversation and takes away opinions from it. So find the balance of going, okay, this is what I'm hearing A say, this is what I'm hearing B say. Why don't we try some bits of this and some bits of this? And if it doesn't work, let's revisit and come back to that conversation.
Cool. Thank you. There's one that I can answer. I was asked a couple of times now, can we share the slides? We will, yes, we will share the slides. We're actually recording. This was also asked earlier. We are recording the entire session, so you might see a recording marker in Zoom. This is just an indication that we are recording this, and we will publish all the videos at some point next week. And when we do so, we will also separately publish the slides so you can have a look at them. But you can also, again, if you like the talks today, you can share the recordings with your colleagues and they can view the talks in full. Next one, Stefan is asking, what do you do to prevent overload on the members when the organization has to change?
Ooh, are you, okay. I have a counter question, but I'll make an assumption to answer it. I would assume you're talking about the overloading of the tech lead and the members, and then I mean, I would probably note down what is the overload and probably speak to your superiors to try and understand and talk about responsibilities, roles and responsibilities, and how to best share them. I guess it's difficult to answer this question without really understanding the details of who and where and what.
Again, maybe you can continue that in the Slack channel.
Sure.
Here's a slightly different question by Flynn. Do you have any recommendations for more junior developers who struggle to see the bigger picture?
Oh, yes. Because I said, especially for me as a tech lead, I find it very fulfilling to help less experienced people, because I feel like people have done that with me. So what I would certainly say, get involved in, go speak to your tech lead and ask to be involved in sort of bigger level discussions. I think that's at the start, it probably would feel like it's a little bit out of your depth, but you will grow into understanding some of those things. One of the things I touched upon was when it's happened a lot where you pick up a story and you want to, there are problems, right? There are problems that we're trying to solve. And when that happens, make sure you are involved and speak to your tech lead to get you involved, because a lot of those conversations help you understand why certain things shouldn't be done. And I think that starts to sort of build your experience to understand the bigger picture. I would say tap on your tech lead's shoulder and ask to be involved in some of these conversations, bigger conversations.
Cool. Check time. Oh, we have a few minutes left. That's good. So Ankur is asking, how deep a tech lead architect should go while helping the team doing an implementation. Sometimes it becomes a little hard to manage the boundaries and expectations.
Okay. I think at the end of the day, because tech lead is accountable, it is still important that the tech lead is able to sort of have the bigger picture and is able to architect. Again, if we think about the town planner, I'm giving Eric a lot of credit here, aren't I? If we would sort of to take the same analogy again, if as a tech lead you're responsible for the building, there are so many more things you're going to be thinking about than an individual on the team who's probably thinking about maybe a flow, right? So you can still sort of dive further down. I think there are these C-level diagrams that you can sort of use. I would say use the similar principle to break down how you want to use this with your team.
Okay. Next one, slightly longer. A difficult and repeated battle I found myself is balancing iteration and incrementing. For example, refactoring to make the change easy, pay off tech debt versus new features. Do you find yourself in this battle too? I'd love to get your thoughts. There are two sides of the same coin. I feel because we both, the business and devs, want to help the business win.
Yeah, sometimes I call this under the radar work, but what I would say is what I tend to do is if there are refactorings and new features that are coming in a similar space, what we would do is sort of try and pull them together. So an example of this actually quite recent, where we had, for a particular service, we had new features coming in, but we wanted to re-architect how some of the things were set in place. So what we did was we actually re-architected the whole service, but combined them with the new features that were coming in. So with each new feature that was coming in that was very close to this re-architecture, we strangled away vertical slices of whatever it touched. So there are opportunities to find that sort of symbiosis of here's some things that we want to change and here's some things that's coming in. Can we, in a way, sort of restructure that?
Okay. These were the easy ones. Now a more difficult one. Are you ready for this one?
All right.
We have roles like tech leader overall. Everyone should be equal in the team. The majority should decide. I find this principle of being one person as an owner just too narrow.
It's a fair point. I think I really want to call out that a tech lead is not a boss. I really want to call out that tech lead is not a manager. I think tech lead is an individual who has a little more responsibilities, because someone needs to look at a slightly bigger picture and sort of drive that ahead of time. In a more experienced team, like if in a team that is very experienced, I've certainly been on them and it has worked perfectly well without having a tech lead. But I think when you've got a mix of experiences, it certainly helps to have one person who is thinking forward and unblocking things and driving some conversations that don't really need to be disrupted across the team.